class, you come in, you do lecture in the afternoon, and you're kind of like fuzzy brain to begin with coming into this. That's this afternoon. But I've got bad news, because that's your brain right now, right? I've got bad news, and that is that foundational stuff happening this afternoon will carry you forward for the rest of this course. Will carry you forward in terms of what you're going to do out in the pre-hospital side as well. So, to me, you turn on, you have questions, if you're not concerned about that. This presentation you can find under pharmacology in your PowerPoint. Everybody there with me? Did you find that? Go to assignments.
Yeah, so this is your brain.
We're hoping just a minute. I want to look at something before we go. At the very bottom.
And you have not put up this week's discussion items yet.
I have not opened those discussion items yet. But that will happen this afternoon. Next hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, we are talking about pharmacology. But wait. This is a toe into the water in terms of pharmacology. So listen to be careful. What's coming tomorrow will tie in exactly with what we're talking about this afternoon. We're talking about general introduction to pharmacology. We're just getting started with this. Tomorrow comes a heavy hammer in terms of Dr. Raby will be talking to you about polynomial literacy. We'll be talking to you about pharmacokinetics and dynamics and the difference between the two of them together. Okay? So this is your toe in the water for what's coming tomorrow, which is kind of like a watershed for you. Okay? So tune in to what's going on this afternoon, and then we'll go forward from there. So what did you get from this chapter? If you need to look at this chapter, what did you get from that? That much, huh?
How medications come about.
Okay. So there's sources, right? Yeah, good. We'll talk about that. What else? That's well.
Different types of medication.
Different types of medication. Yeah. So the forms of different types of medication. Yeah. What else?
The generic versus milligram, pharmaceutical still generic of it is deemed equal in research process.
Straight on. But why does it matter? You're right, but why does that matter? Why does generic matter?
Cheaper.
It is cheaper. That's one of the big deals about it. But the other thing that we're going to talk about this afternoon is generic is not available until the patent has run out. The original patent has run out. So generic sometimes there's a difference between when generic comes online, because that patent typically is going to be somewhere between 3 and 5 years. That means that that place that made it is going to have problems for about 3 to 5 years before generic is turned on. We'll talk about that.
Does that include slightly different formulations of it?
Yes. As a matter of fact, yes. What else? Come on.
The governing bodies involved?
So DEA are the big boys with this, and we're going to talk about a number of different ways that you can look at medications and your sources for it and everything else like that. Right? So let's go. So we're going to talk a little bit. Thank you. We're going to talk a little bit about defining what pharmacology is. You should know about pharmacologists already. We're going to talk about pharmacokinetic as well. We're going to list 4 different medication sources and references, such as plants, such as animals, such as synthetic type drugs. We're going to talk just a wee bit about terminology. So again, listen to me. In your chapter, at the very end of this chapter, there's a whole list of definitions. It would be wise for you to take a look at the definitions. I've got some here that I'm going to show you this afternoon, but understand there's some more there that you want to get your head around. We're going to talk about identifying medications by their chemical, generic, trade, and official names. Each medication out there, I don't care what it is, each medication out there has 4 different names for it. We'll talk about that, the breakout of that. We're going to describe the 4 phases of medication development. That is the clinical trials, how they start from the day that you want to develop drug X to when it's been approved, and a follow-up to it as well, started with the clinical study that comes afterwards. We're talking about the legal regulations that apply to you. You know about that. Medications including the scheduling of controlled substances. We're going to camp there. So we're talking about the differences between a solid and a liquid medication. So pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. You know this. You're going to get a whole hour worth of this tomorrow. Tell me about pharmacokinetics. What does that say to you?
Basically, once the drug is taken, ingested, whatever,
Yep.
how it's absorbed by the body, distributed by the body,
Yep.
metabolized, and eliminated.
Right. So all four play a part, very specific part in terms of what they do. So the idea that tomorrow, as you get further into this, the idea in terms of are there going to be certain limitations in terms of a drug as it's absorbed? Okay. For instance, we're going to talk this afternoon about parenteral versus enteric. Parenteral meaning that we're going to give an IV bolus somewhere. It's going to bypass the liver. It's going to go straight to the functions of it. So this whole process right here is sped up based on what we do with an IV push. Versus enteral, you decide to take an aspirin this afternoon because you've got a headache and tired of listening to me talk. The idea that that aspirin is going to go through the liver, it's going to hang up in the liver a little bit in terms of being absorbed throughout the body. Entirely different in terms of how it gets to where it's going. So as we talked about pharmacokinetics, is from when we take the drug in, or administer the drug, so it's eliminated everything else in between. Okay? Versus pharmacodynamics, tomorrow we talked about the lock and the key approach. Most of the drugs that we give have a specific function in terms of where it goes to for a receptor. And so you'll get into that tomorrow. When a chemical agent is used in the diagnosis, treatment, or prevention of a disease, it's called a medication. When used in a medical setting, drugs are called medication. Here we got that, right? But check this out. Tell me about a chemical agent that's used in the diagnosis of a treatment that's considered to be a drug. Say again?
One more time.
So a drug, some sort of a drug that's given for diagnosis. Is what I'm asking.
IV contrast.
Yeah, exactly. So an IV dye is very, very common, right? Okay. What else? Has any of you ever had skin testing before for allergy? That's this. Okay. So the idea that you give a specific drug to get a specific reaction is part for diagnosis. Pharmacology then is the study of drugs and their effects on the body. You know that. Pharmacologists are scientists who study the effects of drugs on the human body. So check this out. You ever heard of PharmDs before? Anybody had any experience with PharmDs before? PharmD is a doctorate in pharmacology. While the pharmacologists are the smart folk, the PharmD are really the smart folk. Okay? If you go to Sacred Heart and the ED and the pharmacologist folks there frequently are PharmDs. So they're brilliant in terms of what they do. And so great working knowledge in terms of stuff that's out there, great working knowledge in terms of how to get drug and everything else like that. So dating back, I'm not going to go through all this, but the idea that pharmacology and medications have been around for a long, long time. They date back a long, long way. The idea, though, that's been used in modern medicine started in about 1930s or 40s or so, when the first antibiotics were delivered. Pharmacognosy, then, is a study of natural drug sources, to include plants and animals and minerals. So, to that, the idea that you can have over-the-counter, you can have prescription-type drugs along the way that can be made up of these natural resources. So again, this is in your book. The idea, if you look at a plant, an example of that might be morphine. Certainly heroin is part of that. Digoxin is a cardiac drug that comes from a plant, or used to anyways, not so much anymore. Insulin comes from animals. Oxytocin, the drug for pregnancy, comes from animals, or used to anyways. Mineral examples of that would be calcium chloride. Calcium chloride is a cardiac medication that you give along the way. Synthetic, adenosine, you don't need to remember these, don't freak. Adenosine, Valium, insulin, hepatitis B. So the idea that much more than times past, most of the drug that's happening these days comes from this area right here, synthetic settings. A good example of that is fentanyl. And so the idea in terms of most of the drug that's out there, not so much so in terms of animals anymore, not so much in terms of plants anymore. There's some that are still out there, but by lion's share, it's all synthetic in terms of how it's being produced in the lab. And the good news about that is that because it comes from a synthetic source, the drug reactions are less likely to be as severe than if they come from an animal or from a plant. So there's over 100 pharmaceutical companies throughout the United States. And so depending on who the pharmaceutical is, they will produce worldwide, so they only produce here within the United States as well. So, sources of medication information. There's all kinds of stuff that's out there, and we're going to talk about where this came from in terms of this United States Pharmacopoeia and National Formulary. And so this is a big old book that lists all the different medications that have been approved by the DEA, both over the counter and by prescription along the way. Okay? Obviously, in our day and age where we're using internet for just about everything, and everything gets updated on a regular basis, a book form is going to be outdated within a matter of a short period of time. And so to that, while this is the official version that's out there, they also have an online program that talks about it as well. So if I'm you, if I'm sitting in your seat, you need to get a hold of something online, okay? My advice to you is either drugs.com or Hippocrates. Now, Hippocrates you can join for free. It doesn't cost you anything. It gives you updates along the way. It does a nice job in terms of not only laying out the drug itself, but also in terms of the approved of it and the dosages and everything else like that. Drugs.com does a reasonable job in terms of telling you all about the drugs and some of the interactions with it as well. WebMD, not so much in terms of being very specific about the drug itself. Okay.
Does Hippocrates have an app?
Yes, they do. Yep, they do. So my thing to you is this: you should, for your health, not necessarily because of Gary, you should do it for your own health in terms of you're sitting on scene and you don't understand what that drug is. It gives you the opportunity of looking at that online. And so get into a habit of starting to check out different drugs that are out there. And especially as EMT following your medical route, I would go so far as to kind of look on that drug that you're not sure about as to what it does and how it does and everything else like that. But we will, and I will tell you this, we will ask you about drugs in here outside of what we're talking about, okay? And so we're going to study drugs starting next week with profiles, but the idea that outside of that, we're going to start turning to you in terms of coming up from Hippocrates what it talks about. Coming about drugs.com what it talks about. So take a look at it. I'm supposed to tell you, but I think you know already, the pharmaceutical industry is highly motivated and competitive to bring profitable new medications to market. The idea they make millions and millions and billions every single year in terms of what they're doing. You don't have to go far. The news that was most recently about the EpiPens and how much, I forget the company that did it, was charging for the EpiPens. And so the idea that it's a huge problem for them. We're going to talk about the downside to get to that profit here in just a little bit. Proving safety and reliability of these new medications requires extensive research. We're going to talk about clinical trials and how long it takes from start to finish. And that the medications can become generic when the original company's patent expires. I talked about that already. So here it is. Let me show you what you're looking at, and then you can kind of write or make notes or whatever else you want to do along the way. This is from the time that you have drug X, from the very start, before you end up doing trial along the way, to you start to develop it, to the very end in terms of what they call post-marketing surveillance. Okay. So from start to finish, there's 4 different phases of this, and we'll talk about each one of these phases here in just a second. But the idea that drug X has to go here in the United States, drug X has to go to the DEA for approval. From start to finish, we suppose the typical research to getting to trials. How long? 6 months. 6 months? 2 years? Anybody else?
2.
Yeah, you're closer now. The idea that once you start here, you get approval from the DEA here, somewhere between 10 to 15 years. 10 to 15 years. Okay? This is the reason that you hear about some people going to Europe and Mexico and Canada and everywhere else in the world because the clinical trials are not as stringent as this. Okay? But the idea that it's a slow phase, the idea that you go through each one of these steps individually along the way, and sometimes you back up. If a drug fails for whatever reason, you back up and you start all over again in terms of the trial. So long experience in terms of getting your drug on the market. This is the reason. This is the downside for the pharmaceuticals in terms of developing a drug. They're not too terribly highly motivated to start with a brand new drug unless they believe it has promise. So, if Chris, if you were to decide that you want to come up with the next best drug for insulin, and you're going to get a hold of pharmaceuticals in terms of saying, you know what, I got the best drug ever. They're going to say, probably not. Show me your experience in terms of that drug about insulin before we take a look at it. The idea in terms of these trials is tough work. You need to know this. So phase 1 determines the pharmacokinetics. What's the pharmacokinetics again?
How the drug is absorbed and interacts with the body.
Yep. So the idea in terms of phase 1, I'm going to go back up for just a second. I'll come right back to this. Phase 1 is within this clinical research. Okay, so they've already done their homework in terms of figuring out what the drug is and everything else like that. They do some animal testing during this pre-clinical trial. Okay, but the idea in terms of phase 1 is the first step towards getting to whatever it's going to do. How do they do that? How do they decide pharmacokinetics on a drug acts? Yep.
Lab testing?
Yep. So the idea, is it human testing at this point? No, it's all animal study at this point. So the idea in terms of what is the best way to administer this drug? Is it by mouth? Is it by IV injection? Is it by a shot? Is it by the list goes on and on in terms of possibilities? So they take a look at the whole broad spectrum in terms of what is the best way to give this drug. And sometimes there's multiple ways to give the drug. Phase 2 determines the therapeutic medication level. What does that mean?
How much doses you have?
Yeah.
Say again?
How much doses you have?
Okay, so how do they figure that out?
Initially by research, but then it's going to be trial.
Okay. Yeah, but do you suppose they know that this particular drug will only be this dose, or is there a range? Most of the drugs that you're going to start studying next week has a range. There's a specific reason for that. It goes to this right here. So within this window, we know this drug is therapeutic level. We know that we're not over medication or under medication in terms of the dose. But it comes from this initially right here. Okay. So again, phase 2. Take a look. Phase 2 is right here. So we're right in the middle of starting to give this drug to the public or to those that want to participate in the study. Okay? So the idea in terms of giving a higher dose or a lesser dose comes from this understanding right here. Let me give you an example. Etomidate. Etomidate, the dose of etomidate is 0.1 to 0.3 milligrams per kilogram. How did they get to that level? They gave both sides of it. They gave less, they gave more. And they came back to the middle and saying that if we give this much, then it's not beneficial for our patient. If we give this much, it's not enough for our patient medication. So therapeutic level comes from clinical studies along the way. Yeah.
I have a question about Zofran. Is that something that we don't truly understand exactly how it works in the body?
They've got a fairly good understanding. Why do you ask the question?
So I was listening to something and it talked about how they don't really know exactly how it works. And I'm curious how something like that can pass phase 1.
So they've got it. In some cases, to your question, in some cases they've got a fairly solid evidence that it works within the gut. For example, Zofran, that you brought up, Zofran works on an antiemetic within the gut itself. They know it works on that receptor. They just know they don't know about the other things that it does along the way. And so the primary thing that it does is that they just don't have a complete understanding of the rest of it along the way. That's how it gets through clinical studies. All right, so we're at phase 2. Therapeutic medication level. The idea in terms of a lot of lab drugs and clinical studies happens right through here. The idea in terms of how long that lasts for. Tomorrow you're going to hear about half-life. And so the idea in terms of how long the medication is in the body before it reaches its peak performance. So that's kind of half-life. And so again, that comes from this portion of the study right here. Phase 3, they refine the usual dose and study side effects. The idea in terms of this right here, this leads into this right here. So tinkering with this right here of too much or too little, they start getting refined into this. Let me think of a good example of that. Fentanyl. When fentanyl was in clinical studies, they started with as little as 25 mics. They went as high as 250 mics of fentanyl. Now, what's come out in market, what you will get in the habit of doing is you're going to be working up 25 to 50 mics, maybe 25 to 100 mics, and a story. But the idea in terms of the therapeutic medication level is that you had folks that were snoozed for days based on that. The refining happened right here in terms of, let's back off a little bit in terms of 25, say 50 mics as it started going. Okay. What side effects? And I know that sounds like a stupid question, but help me out. What side effects? It's not adverse. Be careful. It's not adverse per se.
Other things that happen.
So give me an example of that.
Fentanyl suppressed arrest.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. The idea that you're going to stop breathing if you have too much fentanyl along the way is a common side effect. Not adverse effect. It's expected. It's predicted. When they do their clinical trials and they end up having 5,000 people that's within the study, what happens most commonly in terms of this right here is predicted along the way. Okay? I double dog dare you to look at a medication and not find somewhere nausea and vomiting. You never see it. So when you start telling me in profiles about nausea and vomiting, it's like, not so much, right? The idea that they will take most common side effects, which, oh, by the way, happens to be nausea in many cases along the way. But there's others that are a whole lot more important, like not breathing, or tachycardia, or bradycardia, or something along the way in terms of particular thing. Okay? I know, you know, that when you get epinephrine, what's the side effect of it? Tachycardia, right? Maybe chest pain, maybe anxiety, maybe tachycardia, right? So exactly. Predicted side effects, you know what's going to happen by giving them a drug. Phase 4, check this out. Phase 4, let me go back. Phase 4, we're over here now, okay? So 1, 2, 3, over a period of time, somewhere between 2 and 10 years, closer to 10 years on average. So post-market is over here. So catch this. It's really interesting the way the DEA celebrates. DEA says that guess what? Drug addicts, pharmaceutical, you don't need to participate in post-market analysis. You don't want to. No big deal. Go do your thing. We're approving it. Life's good. Get on your way. Until it goes bad, that starts then giving a drug, and somebody either gets killed or maimed severely along the way. Guess what we're going to come back to? You can participate in post-market surveillance. Not only are we going to take your legs away, we're going to take your ability to get that drug anywhere. So do you think that folks will only participate in post-market analysis? Yeah. Post-market analysis is nothing more in terms of following up with a drug. So it's going out to the customers are using it, docs are using it, providers are using it, you're using it. The idea in terms of is it everything that we expect it to be along the way. That's all post-market analysis is. That's all we know. Make sense? You know there's 4 phases.
Does that go away once it gets there?
Yeah, over a period of time, typically, as you said, typically when the patent expires, a lot of that will go away.
So at what stage exactly is it post-marketing surveillance where a drug is listed kind of as experimental?
No, the idea in terms of post-marketing surveillance is that it's been approved by the DEA, and it's just a follow-up in terms of what everybody else is using it for and then what's up. Make sense?
So what he's talking about, though, then the clinical trials.
Yeah.
That would be in phase 3.
Yes. So clinical trials is phase 1, 2, and 3. Phase 4 is about post-market. All right. So every drug that's out there, doesn't matter if it's over the counter, doesn't matter if it's by prescription, they all have what's called a numerical classification. It is part of chemical. It's also part of a treatment. Okay. So the idea that all of our drugs out there have both of these along the way. You don't need to remember this per se, but the idea in terms of other classifications for this might be for somebody that's receiving HIV drugs or severely debilitating illness such as for cancer. tablet is a specific number for that drug. It's called an IND. Is required for a clinical study if it is intended to support a new indication. So do you suppose that there's any drug out there that is being used for different than what it was originally was prescribed or approval? Yeah. Okay. Give me an example. Viagra, probably the most common. You all jumped on that real quickly, I noticed. The idea in terms of certain drugs for certain things. Okay. And so the idea that it goes back into clinical trials in some cases. And I'll show you a way that it doesn't go into clinical trials per se. But if you're going to make this huge leap from here to here in terms of what that drug's going to do, it goes back into trials at that point for that specific thing it's going to then do. Also, there's a change in the approved route, administration, or dosage level. Typically, not so much in terms of most of the drugs, because in their trials they've already checked out a number of different ways of administering that drug. Okay. So, for example, nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin, as you have given it, has been sublingual over time, right? There's nitroglycerin that is a IV drip. There's nitroglycerin that has a paste. There's nitroglycerin that has several other forms along the way. Okay? So when they first came out with nitroglycerin, what was approved was for tablets only. Okay? Over a period of time, what it developed was using nitro as an IV gel or paste on the skin. And so they had to go back through and they had to get like this addendum from the DEA for that particular use. So we'll talk more about this in terms of change in the improved patient population. So for example, one day you decide that you want to use it more so for a pregnancy or pediatrics, there's a good chance it has to go back through and have an addendum done for clinical trials with the DEA. So you need to know about orphan drugs. I'll let you write them down. Yeah, tell me about orphan drugs. Yeah, sorry.
They are according to it affects a smaller group, and the idea behind it is that they give tax credits to that company.
Okay.
For research.
Okay, I got that. Somebody else tell me about it. Because it's significant.
It's an incentive to treat smaller populations that wouldn't necessarily create as much profit.
There you go. So check this out. How much do you think it costs the pharmaceuticals to develop drug apps that we just got finished talking about that goes on for 10 to 15 years? Right? So why would they be well motivated to go out and treat for a population that is a rare disease? Not really, right? So the idea in terms of those diseases we hear, that's that small part of population, rare disease, is what we're talking about here. So what the DEA has come up with, the idea that will give you some tax credits based on you end up doing research along the way for this group right here. So orphan drugs, small population.
Is that regardless of if it's separate?
Yes. The expedited medication approval is for those drugs that's hot on the market. Okay? Remember Ebola a couple of years ago? And a huge rush in terms of there were only like 1 or 2 pharmaceuticals in the world that was developing something for a vaccine for Ebola. That's an example of expedited medication approval. The DEA went through the sky in terms of trying to approve things along the way. FDA requires manufacturers to prominently display warning in a black box. Put your pants down with you. I'll put them back up again. So a black box. A black box is, remember back in the clinical trials, and remember in the post-market analysis and everything else like that, well, that may go on for a period of time. So, Trevor, as you were talking about the idea that over a period of time, there might be a nasty outcome of that, okay? So there's a number of different drugs out there that when you give it, it's going to create huge side effects. We'll talk about that. But there's also a number of drugs that might create an adverse reaction, such as, I don't know, death. Okay? Let me give you an example of a black box and the politics behind it. There's something out there that's called gloperidol. You don't need to remember that. Don't you remember? Just listen to me for just a second. So gloperidol is a drug that's used for nausea and vomiting. Gloperidol also is great for sedation along the way. Terrific drug. I'm here to tell you that's one of the best out there, much better than Zofran. Okay? So funny thing happened in terms of gloperidol. Gloperidol was black box because what they called a long QT syndrome. So think about your cardiac rhythm, PQ, QRST, right? So the idea of what they're saying is it stretches out the QT of your cardiac rhythm as they become bradycardia. I wonder what Zofran does.
Doesn't it also?
Amazing how that works, okay? So they black box gloperidol because of this long QT syndrome, and that all the drugs in the classification create exactly the same thing. What do you suppose happened once they black box it? Let's see. Let me take all that liability on myself and keep using that drug that might kill somebody. It went away. But the best drug out there for nausea and vomiting got placed on the sidelines because of politics along the way. Black box is typically going to be some politics involved in terms of pulling that drug. The docs continue using gloperidol. As a matter of fact, there's a resurgence of gloperidol out there that's being used for. But the idea is they use it as a home medicine. When it's a bad outcome, guess what's on? The dots. Right? So black box warning is by the federal government saying that you really should not use that drug because it can create death. Okay? Understand that? Okay? So the black box is you will hear it every now and then. And while you're in here, there's a good chance that we're probably going to hear more and more about some black box. Some drugs are out there, but here I'll let you know. So this is what I was talking about a minute ago, the unlabeled medications. The unlabeled medications, they don't go back through for studies. You pointed out very accurately in terms of Viagra. Viagra, when it first came out, was about what? It wasn't about blood pressure. The interesting thing about that, it wasn't about blood pressure, it was just the opposite. It was about sexual impotence. Okay, so it came out, it was marketed for that along the way. But oh, by the way, by use of it, they found out that it lowered the blood pressure. By the way, Viagra worked, exactly the same thing. All the ED medication are exactly the same thing. They work in terms of vascular supply. And so to that, the unlabeled medication, in some cases, it's used for lowering blood pressure. Is it done accurately? Not the greatest drug out there for lowering blood pressure, but if you want to get somebody's blood pressure down in a bit of a time, Viagra might be one drug to use. And so that's an example of unlabeled type medication. So the docs, not so much us, the docs are much more apt to use something for unlabeled type medication along the way. Okay? Let me give you another example. Adenosine. There's a number of different uses for adenosine. The primary one you learned on here is for lowering somebody's heart rate. So that's a primary thing to it. But the docs are using it for a number of different rhythms along the way. And so much more so than what we'll see in here. In unlabeled medication. Right. Make sense?
Is that different than off-label?
It's the same thing. These medication doses or routes have been utilized in the emergency department, ICU, or proven effective in the emergency setting. So one of the drugs, because it will apply to you, and we're going to have a whole lot of discussion about it. Magnesium. Josh, are you using magnesium at all for respiratory distress? So get this. Magnesium, when it first came out, what it was approved for was a cardiac drug. somebody's magnesium is low on electrolytes, then you give magnesium to try to correct that. Or SODS is the lethal reason for that. Magnesium, over a period of time, the last 4 to 5 years, has become very, very popular for a number of different things, to include respiratory distress. And so an off-label, on-label type use of magnesium is currently for respiratory distress.
Doesn't it also work with the plastic seizures?
So that's a proof. That's an approved thing in terms of magnesium. So not quite. Right? But again, it's another example of the fact that there's a number of different medications that are being used for other reasons other than what it's been approved for. Right? Yeah.
And so eventually those uses will be approved, and then it
Yeah.
will be unlabeled.
When enough people have used that, and there's some sort of commitment to using it for that, then they go back and take a look at it. Yeah.
Okay, and then it's not unlabeled anymore.
Right. Right. So again, understand that when you have off-label or on-label, understand the liability sets with that provider. So each medical director that is, does something in terms of formulary. So for example, here in Spokane County, Dr. DeMio has taken a look at all of the medications that are being used in the pre-hospital setting. And so he lays out, each year does a review, lays out the approved drugs along the way, lays out the doses, lays out the uses and everything else like that. So the interesting thing about it is if you go from Spokane County over to North Idaho, and the difference between Cooney County, the difference going up into Bonners, again, each medical director is taking a different look as far as what's being used for a formula. That's part of the responsibility as a doctor. We've been talking about this during the past week. The idea that if you have an online medical control, the idea they're going to tell you to give 0.3 of epinephrine, IM, for anaphylaxis or allergic reaction. Where offline, it could be more about protocols that give you a range to use and your own indication for using it as well. And oh, by the way, you come up for peer review or QA, QI is part of what they're looking at for other medications as well. The state versus local standards vary widely. That's kind of what I was talking about in terms of going from one county to another county or from state to state in terms of what's been approved along the way. So there's this huge disparity in terms of each drug and how it's used. What time do we start that? All right, so some regulations that go along with oversight for drugs. Starting with 1906, Pure Food and Drug Act. The FDA was established under this act. Federal Drug Administration was established under this act. Prior to this, there had been no standardized thing as far as looking at different medications. Also out of this was prohibited sale of drugs with potential of abuse, i.e. narcotics. Anytime you're seeing potential abuse, we're talking about narcotics along the way. And so prior to that, there were, again, no standardized thing as far as each drug and what it did and what's up. The other thing that was developed in 1906 was what I already told you about. This is the official thing in terms of what the FDA uses as far as approval for each drug. Jumping forward, 1914, the Harrison Narcotic Act was a control importation, manufacture, and sale of opium. Narcotics, once again, folks. If you see nothing else in terms of all these acts, they are always related back to narcotics one way or the other. First time that docs had to prescribe narcotics, get this, before that time, you could walk into a drugstore, and the idea that you could get morphine without a prescription along the way. 1938, Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. It was the first time that they actually put packages, you know, the packages that you find next to a drug. It was the first time that they actually did that. Prior to that, the docs would be responsible for having to look at something. Typically, they came out of a book somewhere, so it would be dated in terms of wherever that drug was. It was the first time that there was warning of habit-forming drugs, again, narcotics. It was the first time that they named the manufacturer, and it was the first time that they actually put drugs for use within that. So it came alongside with whatever the doctor was doing. All right, so the big main one for you in terms of modern medicine is about the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. It established a schedule of narcotics by their abuse, by their ability to be abused along the way. This enforcement rests with the DEA. I'll let you write, I will make notes and move on. So is this federal, state, or local? Okay, so catch this, because it's really interesting for what's going on in Washington State and Colorado and other states that are following suit. They list marijuana as being no use, right? So what's happening in terms of those states that have approved for marijuana use is that there's a conflict between the state and the federal government in terms of how that's working. And every now and then you hear about the Attorney General, federal Attorney General, saying they're going to take action in the state of Washington and Colorado and what's up. So long story short is the jury's out in terms of what's going to happen for that particular drug. But nevertheless, the way the federal government reads that is that LSD, heroin, mescaline, and marijuana have no medical use at all. Okay, high abuse for the possibility. Schedule 2. Catch this. Schedule 2, Schedule 4 are your big ones. Okay, Schedule 2, Schedule 4 are your two big ones. Schedule 2. High abuse may lead to dependence or medical, it does have medical purposes. That includes morphine, fentanyl, cocaine, believe it or not, codeine, oxycodone, and methadone. Right? That means that you have folks that that are liable to get hooked on anything with a Schedule 2. But you know that already. The difference is that from here on out, or the blank page for you that's hard in hand, these are the drugs you're going to end up giving. Schedule 3, less abuse potential may lead to moderate or low physiological dependence, including Vicodin, T3 is part of this. And so you will see those as well. Schedule 4. Schedule 4 is other group of drugs you carry for narcotics. That is, you're going to have access to diazepam or
Codeine in Schedule 2 and 3.
Yep. So this is Tylenol with codeine right here. This is T3. Okay. Diazepam is Valium. I hope my brain didn't get there. So Valium, Ativan, and Versed are 3 drugs that you're going to have access to. 3 drugs that you can give for seizures. 3 drugs that you're going to give for anxiety. And so that's another group of drugs that you'll be using on an ongoing basis that we'll be taking a close look at. Finally, at Schedule 5, the lowest amount, but still a possibility, is those cough syrups with some codeine in it. And Lomotil. Lomotil is used for diarrhea. So the idea that you can actually get hooked on Lomotil because of folks that have had loose stools along the way. Potency is altered, is now stored in proper conditions. The idea that you have, the idea that in our world that we have medications that are exposed to heat, exposed to cold, might have a thing in terms of how well it works. Now, I will tell you that they've done several different studies to look exactly at this for some of the drugs in the pre-hospital side. And what they found is that there's not a whole lot of issue that they could document that makes a huge difference if medication becomes warm or too cold. Nevertheless, the idea that you want to try to store it in a medium type temperature is what we're talking about here. Certain drugs, and especially in the pre-hospital side, certain drugs are meant to be stored in a refrigerator. Examples of that includes succinylcholine, Ativan, diltiazem is another one that's out there that's only good for a specific period of time. So catch this. You would think there's some studies to say how long those drugs should be outside of a refrigerator to be effective along the way. There's not. There's not. And so the idea that each agency will leave it different, each county will leave it different in terms of how long, for example, succinylcholine, it should be outside of a refrigerator before it gets tossed along the way. Most will say 60 days, but there's no documentation to say that, folks. Some will say 45 days, some will say 30 days outside of a refrigerator, and then it gets tossed at that point. So it's all over the board in terms of your local protocols as to how long those drugs that normally are in the refrigerator should be before they get tossed. So catch this, and I want you to hear it clearly, and I want you to hear it from me first. The idea that you can serve time next to Bubba for some sort of issue in terms of narcotics. You know what I'm saying? The idea that I've seen it, the idea that I've heard about it, the idea that there are paramedics who are serving time in a federal penitentiary because of abuse of narcotics along the way. Okay? That's huge. So the idea in terms of storing and making sure that they're locked up and good to go is part of yours. And you're going to love this even more as we get into this a little bit more. Okay? And a controlled substance law. It needs to include the medication administration, the patient's name, medication strength, and dosage form. To that, the idea that every time you give a narcotic, any one of those Schedule 5 drugs, anytime you give a narcotic, the idea that it goes into a log. So if you happen to step over into Coogan County, they're using a computer-based system to do that. If you step here in Spokane County, most of it is to be by a log carried with you. Nevertheless, it all means the same thing in terms of logging this information right down here.
Slightly off subject, those kind of go along with the 6 rights.
Okay.
What's the 6th one?
I'll tell you what, we'll get that next hour. All right, so back to this. The idea that narcotics need to be locked up. You already knew that, right? And did you know that most places say it needs to be under double lock and key, right? Okay. Who came up with that? Right. You're probably closer than what the official answer is. You would think. You think the right answer is the DEA, right? That's it right there. The idea that they never ever said that it needs to be under double lock and key. We have always assumed that the best way of doing that is under double lock and key, right? DEA comes in and does an investigation. Been here and seen that, right? So they come in, they do an investigation. Never ever do they ask whether or not it was a double lock and key. They want to know whether or not it was secure. Now the idea of the double lock and key is one more step further in terms of trying to secure it along the way. But never ever do they say a double lock and key, right? That's us. That's the way that we assume it in terms of security of whatever they're doing along the way. So the idea in terms of when they come in, they do their thing. They will take a broad look in terms of how you're securing your medication, what you're doing in terms of your law, how's your accountability, what's your policy, on and on. The last one that I was involved with, DEA was in town for somewhere around 3.5 to 4 days. Worst 3.5 days of my life. And so the idea in terms of them coming in and taking a long look at this right here puts everybody on edge as far as the possibility.
Was that a known infraction, or was it just they were just doing an audit?
No, they don't come in just to do an audit. They will always come in and there's a problem. And so the agency typically, if there's an ongoing type issue, they will get a hold of the DEA to come in and do that investigation.
About 8 years ago.
Yeah,
Did you do time, Chris?
All right, so one thing I want to point out. So you as EMTs, have you ever witnessed, and I would expect EMR especially, have you ever witnessed wasting of narcotics? Okay? Tell me what you witnessed, Craig.
Normally, actually, the suits are required to do it. Normally, you have to take it and
Okay.
print off a narc sheet at the end of which it's gone from our patient meds and cut tracks, quantities, and how much we get, and turn it into the soup, and then they witness, or sometimes they will even dispose of it for you.
Okay. So,
You both have to sign a paper saying that.
so what are you signing for?
Basically, that you didn't, take it home with you,
Did you witness in terms of how much drug was wasted?
Yeah.
Did you know what you were looking at in terms of how much drug was wasted? I rest my case. So check this out, folks. As EMT, and then I want you to think as a paramedic. The idea as an EMT, I come to you as somebody that supposedly you trust, and I'm going to say, Chris, I've only used X amount of this narcotic. I'm wasting the rest of it, but I don't hold it up to you in terms of looking or anything like that. Chris, I'm wasting this, and you see me squirt it down the gut. Okay? Never did you know how much I actually wasted along the way, unless I specifically show you. Okay? So do yourself a favor. From here on out, when your paramedics will be a pain in the butt for them, but your paramedics may say, I want you to witness the waste of this. Take a look in terms of your education, how much they truly wasted. Okay? And the vice versa, when you get that card in hand and you're going through EMT and say, I'm wasting this drug right here, the idea in terms of showing them how much you actually wasted. It's an educational benefit for those EMTs that you work with, okay? And accountability for you.
Yeah, because on the flip side of it, as an EMT, you see how much they waste, you can't know how much they actually use.
Yeah, true enough. You have to know what's in that bottle when you get this. But again, that's your paramedic on. All right, some terminology, and then we'll go to break. So starting with an assay determines the purity of a chemical as part of the drug. Purity refers to active components. Okay? So there is a slight difference between the two of these right here. Bioavailability is the degree to which a drug is absorbed or reaches circulation. Potency is the strength and power to produce the desired therapeutic effect right here. So this is all about therapeutic effect in terms of potency. Efficacy is how well the drug works. Safety and toxicity is the incidence and severity of reported adverse effects, both within clinical trials and anything that's happened since then as well. Let's go to break. Come on back in about, let's say 10 minutes.
We need to know all the standards.
Most of them, yes. Yeah. All right, let's go. So, as advertised earlier, I told you that all drugs out there have 4 different names. The good news for you is that you don't have to remember, you don't have to memorize all 4 names. Right? So let's kind of talk about that. Each drug has a chemical name, has a generic name, a trade name, and official name. And in some cases, it doesn't have a generic name, depending on if it hasn't been made generic yet. So it may or may not have a generic name to it. But typically, all drugs will have 4 different names. The chemical name is the makeup of the drug itself. So from the lab settings, from the synthetic side, how the drug was made and produced and everything else like that. So in this example, they talk about this particular drug having these different components to it from a molecular standpoint. The generic name is a markedly abbreviated form of the chemical name of the medication. Generic medications usually have the same effect, same efficacy, works as well, and it's cheaper along the way. And oh, by the way, it has a slightly different name, Loperamide hydrochloride. Trade name is a copyrighted. So the idea in terms of what part goes into the USP for documentation is a trade name. Okay? So Loperamide and Demerol, same thing. The idea is that you'll see the generic side of this as Loperamide, while in many cases you're going to see Demerol as a common thing. Where did you get the trade name? Trade name is just one they come up with for that particular drug. So again, it's a pharmaceutical that they come to up.
There's no rhyme or reason.
No, there isn't. They can call it brand X if that's what they want to do, but typically they just come up with it. Probably somebody making millions of dollars over that, I'm not sure. All right, so trade name, official name. So again, check this out. While all four of these will go into the structure as far as the USP, what you will see is its official name right here. Okay? So the drug with the official name is the one that's there. The other three play a part as well. Usually the official name and the generic name go hand in hand in terms of wherever the drug is. The suffix here, the USP, is the fact that the official name that goes in the little log. You okay? So the four different names. You need to know that in terms of not for every single drug that we have out there, but you need to know that there's four different names and what the way that's set up. Okay. Yeah.
What's the difference between USP
USP is the pharmacology portion of that. And what was the other one again? NF. NF is I would have to go back and look in all honesty. USP is the one that we'll talk about the most. I'll go back and take a look at this.
National formulary.
Is that what it is? Thank you.
National formulary.
Medication forms. Medications can come in the form of liquids or solids, suppositories, or inhalants. So again, you don't need to remember the name of all this, or the different forms of this, or anything else like that. The idea, though, that it comes in different, three different forms: liquid, solids, suppositories, and can be inhalants. Oh, one thing about this. Can you have certain medications that come in more than one form? Yeah. So the idea, depending on what the drug is. A good example of that is Zofran. Zofran can be pushed IV push, and also be an oral tablet along the way. So that and many others. So what we're talking about the next hour, we won't talk about it now, is ampules, prefilled syringes, and vials. And again, I'm going to pass this because we're coming to this in the next hour. Pass this. All right, so components of a drug profile. All of these play a part in terms of each drug as to how it's profiled out there. Okay, so there's all kinds of different categories to it. Let's talk a little bit about them as far as each section. So we talked about a drug and it has four different names along the way. So past that classification, it's a broad group to which the drug belongs, i.e. lidocaine being an antiarrhythmic, epinephrine being a cardiac and respiratory emergency. If you look in your farm book under Appendix C, you will see in many cases about the broad section for each one of those drugs out there. Right? I typically will not ask you about the classification per se, but as we get deeper and deeper in this, then you should have an understanding that it works either on the cardiac side, the respiratory side, or both. We're talking about the mechanism of action. We're talking about pharmacodynamics. The way in which a medication causes its effect, not in chemo that we're talking about tomorrow. Indications then is what it's been approved for by the FDA. We talked about unused, or we talked about outside of that as far as different drugs along the way. Pharmacokinetics, we talked about earlier, being absorption, distribution, biotransformation. That is how it gets offloaded from the bloodstream into the cellular level, and then finally elimination. We talk about side effects, the fact that the drug's untoward or undesired but predicted effects. The idea that the example I gave earlier was about fentanyl. Fentanyl, overdose of fentanyl, the idea in terms of, while it's a side effect per se, what it creates is it's apnea. So the idea that it turns into an adverse reaction. I mentioned this earlier. You're going to get this tomorrow as well, but listen to what I'm saying. How a drug is given is either enteral or parenteral. Enteral is through the mouth. You take a tablet would be a good example of enteral. It can be through an orogastric, nasogastric tube as well. It can be sublingual, so that when we end up giving nitro, while it's considered to be enteral, it creates dust back before it ever gets to the liver. That's why it acts so quickly along the way. And yet it's considered an enteral medication. Parenteral that will avoid the GI tract. Now catch this. It doesn't mean that it doesn't end up in the liver, because the liver is the big organ that we're talking about that does this metabolizing of drug. But the idea that will eventually end up in the liver as far as breaking it down and everything else like that is just the difference is that this is going to go straight to whatever the receptor is. So in the example of somebody in cardiac arrest, you give epinephrine, it's going to have a dramatic effect right away in terms of whatever's going on within the heart itself. Over a period of time, will the liver want to metabolize that? Absolutely. Just that the difference is that parenteral goes to the receptor first, and then GI tract afterwards. And there are a number of different drugs. What we do in the pre-hospital side is primarily parenteral, so that when we end up pushing IV medications, when we end up pushing medications down the ET tube, do it IO, do it IM, subcutaneous. When we end up doing a neck treatment, we end up putting patch on the skin. When we end up doing something in terms of nasal atomizer, all parenteral as far as the drug goes.
Gary, I've got a quick question. Yep. So you got a heroin overdose?
Yep.
Those receptors, is it on the synaptic cleft?
Yes.
Right? Just get flooded with that?
Yes.
And then if you give Narcan, how does it go from wherever it is?
So the way that Narcan works is that it is an antagonist to that particular drug. So while that synapse is open for heroin that you talked about, Narcan will come in and will close that synapse along the way to kind of block that effect of heroin.
Does it get into the bloodstream?
Yeah.
So that's supplied by blood.
Yeah. So antagonist is a good example, especially Narcan working so quickly. That's
the question, where does like this talk through?
So it's kind of interesting that the question that you asked. It's not exactly the simple. Let me go back and find it again. To your question, it's considered to be enteric as far as because it's part of the GI tract. But suppose that you want to give value rectal. The idea that will work very, very quickly in terms of crossing that blood. So how that works, there's a whole lot of question about that. While it's enteric in terms of the administration of it, it actually has an effect in terms of parenteric. So some will say that it does both.
It's not an either one.
I would say it's both. Yeah. All right, so we good with this? Contraindications, conditions that make it inappropriate to give the drug, meaning predictable harmful event will occur if the drug is given in a situation. So sometimes you will have adverse reactions and contraindications that kind of mimic each other, okay? The example that we've been giving this afternoon is about fentanyl, giving fentanyl either too fast or too much. It's predictable that the patient's going to start breathing along the way, okay? So again, contraindications, adverse effects mirror each other. The dosage, the therapeutic dosage, okay? And again, I mentioned it earlier, I'll mention it again. As we start studying profiles, that you're going to have a range. That therapeutic range is somewhere within. Yes, I'm going to make you, in most cases, know the range, not just drug dose itself, okay? So, for example, a Talmud is going to require you to know 0.1 to 0.3 milligrams per kilogram. The idea that once you get out of here, you start putting that into practice, you'll come up with your own in terms of what drug you want to give and how much you want to give along the way. Make sense? Okay. How supply includes the common concentration of the available preparations. Many drugs come in different concentrations. So, for example, you have epinephrine in terms of pre-fill. You have it in an ampule, you have it in a auto-injector, you have it in a multi-dose type thing. And so a number of different things depending on what you're doing and how you're going to use it, like that.
Question on that.
Yep.
What is the 1 to 1,000, 1 to 10,000? Is that what to parts?
So,
1 part drug to 10,000 parts?
Yes, it's a concentration of it. So 1 to 1,000 is actually a heavier concentration than 1 to 10,000 along the way. All right, so check this out. How the drug may affect pediatric, geriatric, or pregnant patients. Now, do you suppose that there's a whole lot of trouble instead of in terms of studying the geriatric population as to how the drug works? So people are probably pretty willing, especially as we get older and older, as old guys don't mind experimental drugs, especially if there's hope that's going to take care of whatever our disease process is, right? And so the clinical studies, geriatrics, usually not a big deal. But how many pregnant women are willing to go up and do clinical trials based on the pregnancy that they're in right now to see how well the drug will work? Probably not. How well do you think that most pediatric drugs are studied as well in terms of clinical trials? So most cases, what you're going to see is may have effect in pediatric generation, may have effect in pregnancy. Give an example of that. And so, in a pregnancy, we're talking about a case crossing over the son barrier and cause issues with the child. So the first gestational side of a pregnancy is where this is, first trimester, I should say, is where this is going to have its effect. It's called a teratonic drug. It's a medication that may deform or kill fetus. Back in the 60s and back in the 70s, there were never different drugs that were out there. They believed it was safe to use during pregnancy. It turns out there was a huge, huge thing in terms of either fetal demise or fetal complications along the way. And so since then, the FDA is very, very cognizant of the fact of issuing alerts on it. This is what I was talking about with pregnancy. So what you will see, and you don't have to memorize this, you don't have to put it into your memory bank, but all I'm doing is just showing you the idea that with pregnancy, a lot of cases they end up doing animal studies along the way. But it's not adequate. Adequate studies in pregnant women have not demonstrated a risk to the fetus in the first trimester, and there's no risk in the last trimester. Okay, and so that's category B. Category D. Fetal risk has been demonstrated in certain circumstances. Benefits could outweigh the risk, and yet there's no huge studies that they've done to show this as far as the fetus goes. And it's more supposition to think that if they give this drug, this is what's going to happen with the pregnancy. Same thing with kids. The idea that absorption is less than in adults, although metabolized, kids will metabolize drugs that much quicker. Let me give you an example of how that plays out. In a dose of succinylcholine that we give for RSI, the dose given alone is 1 to 1.5 milligrams per kilogram for adults. You're going to see some protocols that say 2 milligrams per kilogram of succinylcholine per child. Why is that? Because they metabolize it that much quicker along the way. And so when you always think the dose is going to be less, sometimes it's actually going to be more depending on what's going on in the child and the drug. Get into the habit, starting today, get into the habit of knowing what a kilogram is and how to convert it into pounds. So 2.2 pounds is equal to a kilogram. And so you're going to start playing with that. Lots. Braslo tape they're showing there, and using Braslo tape is one of the ways of getting there as far as drugs go. Geriatric population. So we talked about pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics just a week ago, right? And we said that pharmacokinetics is what again? How the drug is taken in, how it's metabolized, how it gets to where it's going to be, and how it's eliminated. Okay? So in geriatric population, why do they do so crappy as far as, no pun intended, why do they do so crappy in terms of the drug and getting rid of the drug and everything else like that? Okay, that's part of it. Metabolism slows down.
Kidneys and liver.
There you go. Kidneys and liver are the primary organs that we use as far as getting rid of and eliminating that drug along the way. And if they happen to be in renal failure, and they happen to be in liver failure because be able to eliminate that drug. They're not. This is the reason why geriatrics and drugs are huge deal. I could say that today, but that the day is coming where we're going to camp there and talk about that a whole lot along the way. All right, this goes back to what I was telling you earlier, the idea of the definition that's here, but there's a whole other list that's in your book as well. So you yourself a favor and take a look at that. When we talk about allergic reaction, we're talking about hypersensitivity, okay? The idea that when you give a drug, allergic reaction will be flat out allergic reaction the first time they get that drug or not. Penicillin, let's get penicillin. You've got a patient that has a infection going on, you get penicillin. They're going to run into an allergic reaction first time out. No, why?
The body doesn't completely recognize it as an issue right away.
So it's easy to put an antibody along the way. It's no different when you give a medication. The first time the body has seen that drug, it's not going to recognize it as being an antigen or antibody that's needed for that. So the first time around, the body gives a free pass as far as wherever that drug is going the way. And typically, not a big deal the first time around. But you go back and you get that same drug the second time, third time, fourth time along the way, it's going to be a huge difference in terms of the possibility of the body building up antibodies to that whatever that drug is. And it's still the most classic one. Although there's hundreds of others out there as far as what creates an allergic reaction. But the hypersensitivity, the body's response to that is the second time or third time, is we'll build up antibodies to whatever that particular drug is. This is when you start hearing about allergic reactions. This is when you sometimes hear about anaphylaxis as well. When we talk about idiosyncrasy, we're talking about a drug that has unique individual effects. So very, very particular to that particular drug, and that goes through trials, and that also comes out on the streets. You start hearing about certain things about certain drugs. Let me give you an example. Demerol that we were taking a look at earlier, as an old guy that has been using Demerol forever and ever now, using it forever and ever in terms of administering it to patients. Nausea, very, very common with Demerol. It's one of the reasons that Demerol went by the wayside because it did create some nausea with it, even more so than what you expect with side effects. That is an example of an idiosyncrasy for that particular drug. Tolerance, decreased response to the same amount. What does that mean? So that I know yeah. So usually we're talking about addicts. Usually we're talking about the fact we need more and more heroin to create the same effect along the way. And so the idea in terms of tolerance becomes greater and greater over a period of time. Yeah.
So if we pick up a heroin addict that's got run over by a car, and they've got their leg crimped off the side, they want the pain meds. We want to give them more.
I'll tell you what, I would love to answer your question, but I think that would take us over into a gray area that I don't want to get into. So my answer is it depends on the circumstance. Cross tolerance. Cross tolerance is a tolerance for a drug that develops after administration of a different drug. So the idea that you can have narcotics especially that has a cross tolerance along the way. Cumulative effect, you need to know. Cumulative effect is increased effectiveness when a drug is given in several doses. Give me an example of that. It could be. Gabapentin could be. The big one is antibiotic, okay? So I come in today and I start antibiotic because I have such and such an infection along the way. 24 hours later, my cumulative effect should be such that my penicillin into my body over the 24-hour period of time should be increased from where it was 24 hours ago. Make sense? So the idea in terms of the infection then over a period of time is addressed. It's the same thing when we get epinephrine. It's the same thing when we give adenosine. So we're going to study with adenosine that we're going to give 6 milligrams initially to try to slow the heart rate down. When that doesn't work, we're going to move on to 12 milligrams. That's an example of cumulative effect in terms of our medications.
Is it also the cumulative as in they're giving more of a dosage each time, or is it just
typically
the same dosage, but just over?
It can be both. It can be either or in terms of what's going on. It can be a greater dose and also be the same dose over and over again. Drug dependence is nothing more than what it sounds like. The patient becomes accustomed to the drug's presence in the body. A lot of times we're talking about narcotics that goes along with it, although it's not just that as well. There's some other drugs out there. When talking about a drug interaction, how well does it play in the sandbox with other drugs? There are certain drugs that do not play well together. Okay? Let me give you an example. Sodium bicarb and calcium don't play well in the sandbox together. Sodium bicarb will wipe out the effects of calcium. Okay? So the idea in terms of how you get that drug because of that kind of reaction is something that's very, very specific to that drug. Okay?
So on dependence, differing that from tolerance?
Same thing. Same thing. I won't cut here. That's fine about it. Drug antagonism. What's the one Trevor was talking about?
Heroin and
Right. And so probably the most classic one. Although there's other ones out there. There's other ones that we will talk about that are antagonistic for what's going on. Potentiation. One drug enhances the effect of another. What's that? What's a good example of that?
Fentanyl and Versed.
Fentanyl and Versed. Yeah, that's a good example. What does it do?
They potentiate each other, so it creates a stronger reaction.
So not only will it be about pain, but also about altering level of consciousness, right? So they potentiate each other. So there's a number of different drugs that we put hand in hand that does potentiate each other, and we'll be talking about those at the time. Synergism is similar and yet a wee bit different. Synergism is two drugs with the same effect are given together and produces a response greater than the sum of the individual responses. So 1 + 1 does not equal 2. 1 + 1 equals 3 because it potentiates itself that much greater along the way. No, because they both do primarily the same thing. Synergism would be that you give a good example. Synergism would be that you give epinephrine and you give atropine at the same time. They both are going to have an effect in terms of cardiac output. And so the idea that if one didn't work and you end up going to the other would be a good example of synergism. Interference, the direct biochemical interaction between two drugs. One drug affects the pharmacology of another drug. And again, that interference goes back to drug interaction. The one that I want to remember the most, though, is this right here. Okay, so on any given prescription bottle that's out there, should have this as a minimum. You don't need to remember all of these, but the idea in terms of the FDA, one of the things they did with all their acts along the way was they came out and said there's a minimum of things that need to be on each one of the labels. And so that when you go into somebody's house and you look for information about it, it should have these as a minimum for each one of those prescriptions out there. Factors having drug response. So check this out. You need to know this list first of all. I'll let you write it out. I'll put my mouth on the phone. Start writing down the list a little bit. Who do we say that are most prone for age? Pediatrics and geriatrics, right? So two different age groups, right? Body mass, what does that mean? Weight, right? So somebody that is very, very frail, a little 74-year-old lady that's very, very frail, does she need 100 mics of fentanyl starting out of the gate? Probably not, right? So the idea that we're probably going to kill her basically. Whereas the 400-pound person is 1.5 milligrams per kilogram of colon going to be adequate to create the inhibition effect that we have. So it happens on both sides in terms of your dose. And while what you have is the normal dose level, you know that you're going to have to alter it based on the body mass along the way. Make sense? Sex, not the act of, but sex in terms of gender. Why is there a difference between male and female as far as drugs go? And hormones as well. Hormones would be the other big deal in terms of gender and the effect of the drug on it. Okay? The environment,
So with the, I guess we see a lot of transgender people who are taking hormones.
Yeah. And I would love to answer that because it's something that I've been pondering about. I don't know. I would pitch that to Dr. Ray tomorrow.
Could you just give us a definitive answer?
No.
Gary, to go back just a little bit about the different doses, like you said, the 1.5 subs may not be. Do I have to call medical control to ask to give it?
Great question. So Christina's question is, do we need to call medical control for that? Most times, get careful. Most times, remember I told you last week, if you can stand before a medical authority and say that this is the reason why I went with 2 milligrams per kilogram fluoxetine, 99% of the time, doctors are going to say, good for you. Good call. Okay. Answer your question?
Yeah.
So let's continue on. Environment. What are we talking about there? Well, what was that? Hypothermia. So when we get into hypothermia, when we start talking about environment, I'm going to tell you that you don't give medication to somebody that has a core temperature below 86 degrees. If you do, it's just going to sit there. And oh, by the way, then you give dose after dose after dose, and all of a sudden they wake up, and all that drug is hitting their chest. How do you think that's going to go? Right? So environment, we're talking about heat and cold. Time of administration. Why does it make any difference in terms of time of day?
You might be tired.
Well, we're just going to go to sleep.
And if they have food in their stomach versus not,
That's it. So the idea in terms of a lot of times you hear about taking medication with food at the same time. Typically, it's lined up with time. So you wake up in the morning and you take a drug that's going to create nausea along the way. It usually says start by taking a meal or something to eat. It's usually associated with time before you take that drug. So pathologic state, what are we talking about? Disease process, right? So the idea in terms of where the disease process is may have an override in terms of whatever that drug is along the way. So your doc tells you that you're going to take, let's start with fentanyl because we played with it along the way. Your doc tells you that you're going to take 100 mics of fentanyl, and yet you just had huge surgery day before it lasted. It's not touching the feet. Is the pathologic state going to have a greater effect on whatever the drug dose is? Example. Genetics, all by itself, genetics, the idea that we're predisposed from our genetic makeup as to how well a drug can work within our body. The physiological side. So understand this. I'm not telling you, I'm never ever telling you to give a placebo. Never ever would I do that, okay? But here's this. I'm getting ready to give you the fentanyl, and man, this should really slow you along the way. And I do my best in terms of being a used car salesman about selling that fentanyl. Make sense? The drug dose will be the same each and every time. I'm going to get it. But the idea in terms of if I have a patient that believes that it's not going to have its effect, then I try to sell that drug. Does that make sense? Okay. That's the physiological or psychological side. Yeah.
So, that being said, what's your stance on people getting normazoline?
Not so great. Drugs and alcohol on board. Sadism, so in Spokane, Washington, right? With a heroin effect, that's what's going on, right? Well, what about alcohol? What does alcohol do to most of the drugs we've got there, especially narcotics? Potentiate effects, folks. 1 + 1 in this case definitely equals 3, sometimes 4. Alcohol and Benadryl together, deadly effect. The idea in terms of alcohol and a lot of other things out there will potentiate it in a much greater state. That's enough of that. Questions? Do yourself a favor. Go back and take a look at that tonight. Be prepared for whatever rain comes in tomorrow because the stuff he's got for you is a fair amount deeper than what we've been talking about. Okay? Heads up on that? Take about 5 minutes stretch, come back, and we're going to jump into medication administration.